Okay, hello there, my name is Smokey, and I will be working on where I last left off from navigating, right? Okay, now I'm going to be teaching you about Artmeshes. Artmeshes is very vital to Live2d. It's the bare bones of everything Live2d, right? So for now, I'm going to be teaching you how to edit your mesh manually, how to make it more effective, how nifty tips and tricks for it, right? Okay, when you're going to be editing your meshes, right? Go to press Control E, right? Control E is the edit mode for your meshes. Basically, this is your automatic mesh generator, right? This is the one that you come with when you're entering Live2d, right? So for now, I want you to go to Auto, select here, go to Standard, right? I have my own settings here. So this is very very bad what you call this meshing for Live2d because it's ineffective. It is janky for some parts here. When you're going to be making your own meshes for Live2d, try to think of it like this. You're going to create one for the outline of the object, right? The line art of it, right? And the other one that covers the whole object, right? This second line right here. It is very vital because anything that is under an art mesh will be seen, right? Right? Because I cut off that part, it cannot be seen anymore, right? So that is a nifty trick, right? Because if, for example, right, like this, on some parts of the model there will be like brushes that is not what you call this thing separated, right, from left and right. I'll just click simple add, right, and you want to separate them from left and right, right? So basically you gotta go here, copy paste it, right, go to your parts, paste it, select the other one, delete the meshes for it. That's left. We go to the other one. That's right. So now you have cheaply separated your left and right meshes, right? That's an easy way to separate left and right. I just did it haphazardly because I was going to show you that. So when you're thinking of like thinking your meshes, right, you gotta think like that, right? Creating the outer edges, inner edges, right? I'm going to share you some of my personal what you call this thing automated generated mesh, right? Because when you're going to start Live2d, you're going to select everything by pressing Control A, and you're going to press Control Shift A to set an automatic mesh generator standard, right? If you see that mesh open, there is some parts that will be going to be invisible, right? I know which one of them are because I've messed around with this model. I've already set up this one, right? So basically, right, that is the automated mesh generator. Some parts is kind of iffy, so I'm going to give you this one. Control Shift A, please, for me. I want you to go to make this, right? I want you to set the vertex spacing to 70, 8, 0, 5, 10, 0. This is typically only used for hair, right? Just hair. That's it. Any more than that, it's up to you. This is for your perusal, right? I want you to click add and name this whatever you want it. I name it eyelash it because I've come to use it for eyelashes and hair. This is just the preliminary. If I want to make the mesh much more subjective to my desires, I would have to edit it manually. But you can see now that the mesh here is more corresponding to the thing that I had created, right? It's an easy fix, an easy problem, right? For some parts, right, like flesh right here, I want to press Control Shift A again. Flesh, this one, right? I've set it to 50, 8, 0, 5, 10, 0. Very useful because it's a lazy way to do meshes, but here's the thing, don't be reliant of this. I want you to still create your own meshes for Live2d. Next up, I'm going to be teaching you the nifty tricks about Live2d meshes. Right now, on 4.2, right, I'm going to just pull out this one, on Live2d. Basically, there's clipping ID, invert mask, and everything right here. I'll start from top to bottom. This is your name, this is your ID. You can change the different parts, right? If you go to parts and just change it to root, you're going to set this all the way up, but because it's just under 1 right now, it's going to be there, right? Clipping ID, right? You can also change it here, right? Root part and everything, because it doesn't have deformers, right? This is the deformer tab. I'm going to create like a deformer, right? Here, if I want to transfer this mesh to another deformer, this is a nifty trick. You can just click here, hair front, and it transferred from there. Very useful for some parts because you gotta get lazy sometimes and use that. Next up is clipping ID. Basically, clipping ID works in the function that whatever is the filled in part, it's going to be clipping there. So if I copy this part right here, paste it on the clipping ID for this object right here, right? It's only going to be shown on what part there is for this one, right? So this is what we see, right? Right? So we can see that this object right here, right? Oops, because it's lower, it can't be seen. It can only be shown at whatever parts this object has. Very useful for the eyes, right? If we go to click here, select the sclera for this eye, copy it, paste it on the pupil, so that when you move the pupil, it'll only stay at that part. Very useful for the eyes. Abuse that as you will. Next up is reverse clipping, right? Reverse clipping works in the same function as Live2d. Basically, it's the clipping, but reversed. Basically, it'll avoid it, right? So if you copy the mesh for this one, paste it on here, right? And paste inverted mask. If you're going to go over this, it's going to avoid that. It can be seen that even if it's invisible, it's still going to be avoiding that part because it's, inverted mask. So it's very useful for some parts like this one, the middle face line here. If you have to an object like this, copy, paste this shape line right here, paste it and inverse it, right? You can see that it'll be affected by it, so that when it approaches it, it goes bye-bye, invisible, right? Very useful. That's how you can use that thingy. On 4.2.0, right, there's the new object called multiply color and all of that, which you can just basically means you can change the color of your object. Highly useful for some instances because you can make some cool color changes now with Live2d. Next up, we have blend mode. Additive multiplies. Additive will make it more, shinier, and multiply makes it darker. Next up is a very highly important tool, which is culling. Culling basically means when the mesh is inverted, it will go invisible, right, like that. Or much more pronounced, like doing like this. You can see that because I flipped it, the mesh is now visible. It'll only be visible once again when I unflip it, right? Done. Okay, nifty trick. If you're going to go to those thingamabobs called, what you call this thing? On vtubestudio, right? If you go to user data, type here VTS underscore ignore underscore scene underscore lighting. Basically, it'll on vtubestudio, it's going to be ignoring the scene lighting for what you call this thing, vtubestudio. Let me pause the video real quick and I'll pop in vtubestudio real quick. Okay, basically on vtubestudio, there's this option, right, on the second one here, right, where you can say display lighting, right? I'll select the second screen because it's much darker. Basically, it'll imitate the color of your model, right? General color of your model, right? But here's the thing: because I enabled the the VTS scene ignore for one part, it can and will ignore the scene lighting, right? See, it's much more vibrant than the model itself. It's going to be shown there mostly because I've set this part to be VTS scene ignore scene lighting, right? Which is highly useful for some parts, and that's all the nifty tricks that I can teach you about Artmeshes on here. Now when I'm going to be editing it, here's the nifty part. You only need this part right here because I'm going to teach you how to edit meshes faster, right? When you press Control Drag, it's going to be using your lasso tool, right? So the fastest way you can do with modeling, right, is lasso tool everything, plot out your points, right? This is brought by, consistently rigging and everything like that. Plotting out my points here. Right after that, oops, I'll be making the outer layer for it. This is horrible, by the way, but this is how to prove a point that you only need that tool. If you're going to move one tool, just click on it and move it. If you want to go to one part but don't want to connect it, just click escape to deselect the part that you are using. So yeah, move it, escape, move it, right, escape, move this back, escape, right. If you want to do connect parts, right, click red on that one. I typically use that options right there for faster rigging. You can also hold Alt and clicking, alt click, alt click, alt click, alt click, alt click, so that you can remove a point or change the destination of these blue lines. Basically, those blue lines is where it will connect to after it is auto connected, right? Next up, I'm going to be teaching you, just this is the normal eraser, this is the minus tool. You'll need this tool for most of the mesh editing, and this one if you have a part that's just thin, right? When you're making that, you can edit the different points of it, right? That's the, what you call this thing, the stroke mesh mapping, right? You can change the width, right? You can change the repeated density of it, right? To more, less. You can change it to 1, right? You can change it to 3. I typically use 3 for the mouth, right? Because when I'll be using the mouth for some models, I'd be lazy AF, and like when I'm going to be editing them, I use that a lot to save myself some time, right? For example, this one, this is the processed one, right? You can see here that I use the stroke mesh mapping to create the shape of the mouth. I decrease the mesh width, right? And increase the repeated density. And here's the nifty trick. If you have to hold control, clicking and dragging, you can change the weight of some parts, right? To be thinner, to be thicker, like that, right? Very, very fucking useful. And that's it. That's how you can mesh with Live2d. I'm gonna disable this because I don't want this to be having problems later. And that's how all the nifty tricks, how all the speed art meshing tips that I can teach you about Live2d's art mesh.